that you keep the two factions divided and they work against each other. But the problem has started from January when Mr. Netanyahu formed his coalition government by taking far-right parties into his coalition. There is Mr. Ben Gvir, who heads a very anti-Arab party. There is Smotrich, who has a hyper-nationalist faction. And so they've altered the agenda on which there was consensus in Israel for the last 30, 40 years, whenever the peace process was taken up. So that basic understanding has been changed. They were moving, and that's why they went after the judiciary. And once the attack on the judiciary started, of course, Netanyahu did it to save himself from corruption charges. But the extreme right wing is interested because they want to refashion Israel into a completely orthodox Jewish state, in which the Arab will be a second-class citizen, or the Palestinian will be a second-class citizen. So many of those proposals were moving in that direction. And the world has ignored it. Nobody has any time for it because agenda of the world has moved on. And in the meanwhile, the Americans started
Smitty, good to see you, bro.
by bringing Israel into the mainstream and restructuring the architecture, the security architecture of West Asia. And that's where the Abraham Accords came. UAE stepped in, but the Saudis were holding back. So you had I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE, and US. We had the India-Europe on the sidelines of G20, that there'll be a line going all the way from here, on land, maritime connection to Europe. And I said the fact that all the people sitting who announced this were there accepting the Prime Minister of Israel. So if you don't have the Israeli Prime Minister there, what kind of a deal is it? And that problem is always going to arise. So this was always bubbling. And in fact, the Defense Minister of Israel protested at one stage, and he said the protests, large protests against the attack on the judiciary are affecting the Israeli Defense Forces. He was made to resign by Netanyahu, and there were more protests. Then he took him back.
Let me
add one more thing.
Yes.
Just one more thing.
Yes.
The head of the intelligence told the government that if you don't stop the Israeli settlers from committing acts against the Palestinians, there'll be a reaction. So there's been talk within Israel that we've been really repressive. Let's not do this. Let's not follow this far-right agenda. And this explosion was just waiting to happen.
Can I just take that to Helit Barrel? Because I've been reading Thomas Friedman, author of Beirut to Jerusalem in the New York Times. A number of them are questioning Netanyahu's role in terms of his politics of divide and rule, which has been dangerous, according to him and others, for Israel, just as Hamas has been deadly for the average Palestinian people. They don't care. Hamas has done very little for the people of the Palestine, but has used violence as a weapon. Netanyahu is being accused of using an extreme right-wing xenophobic agenda to reduce Palestinians to second-class citizens. Is that enough for Netanyahu to ponder over as well, Helen?
First, I really do not accept any equivalence between Netanyahu and Hamas. Having said that, I am not a supporter of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I have been staunchly within the centrist peace camp in this country, and along with many other people who are ex-security establishment, who are ex-combatants, have been out demonstrating precisely because of things that were said here about the radical nature of the Israeli government and how it is moving us away, unfortunately, from a two-state solution with the Palestinians. But I will repeat and say, this has absolutely nothing to do with the events that's transpired here over the last 2 days. This has nothing to do with the government of Israel. It could have been any other government. I could have been in government. It still would have happened because that's what Hamas is. But is Netanyahu's policy of separating and even sometimes strengthening Hamas at the expense of the Palestinian Authority, something that does not serve the Israeli people? Absolutely.
So in a sense, you go along with Casey Singh, who just said, Helit, that this was waiting to happen, that Hamas was itching for a confrontation. You've got other issues bubbling, the possibility of Israel and Saudi Arabia working out some kind of a negotiated agreement. All of this bubbling over, and Hamas, with the possible support of Iran, jumping into, itching for a confrontation that would re-establish their relevance in a way in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, there is no doubt in my mind that Hamas is backed here by Iran, that it did not carry out this operation on its own. that it is not something that was planned and executed solely by Hamas, and together with Iran's support of Hezbollah and other proxy groups, for sure. The thing about Iran is this: there's nothing Iran wants to see less than peace in the Middle East. There's nothing that Iran wants to see less than Saudi Arabia joining and enhancing what is also already the Abraham Accords, and creating some sort of moderate coalition in the Middle East that would counter its radical policies, its use of terrorism, and its relentless pursuit of a military nuclear capability. So absolutely, if this could strain Iran, if this could strain the possible peace, which is already complicated to carry out, they would do that.
So, Casey Singh, you've served in Tehran, you know that area well. Do you believe that Iran is effectively the puppeteer, that Hamas is acting on Iran's instructions? Is that possible or likely?
I have never served in Tehran.
No, sorry, Casey Singh has. Casey Singh has.
Right.
Rajdeep, there are many puppeteers and many puppets, but many of these puppets act on their own. They use those who are pretending to be puppeteers. They have many factors driving them. I don't think it's as simple as Iran pressing a button and Hamas acting, but yes, there are interlinkages. There would be weapons transported despite the isolation of the Gaza Strip, and somewhere in the background may also be Russia. Don't forget that there is a new configuration to the extent that this new distraction takes place. So remember, the Americans have had to move a naval flotilla to the Eastern Mediterranean. To the extent that happens, the American focus on Ukraine goes off. So we know there are close links at the moment between Iran and Russia. We know that there is another configuration, but interestingly, the Chinese have adopted the traditional balanced position. They just simply said restraint, and they repeated the two-nation principle, whereas India only talked of one and not of the other, and that is why they speculate. It's not that Prime Minister did something wrong by condemning the terrorism, which is the correct thing, but because India usually uses both the arguments, so that is why it was noticed, and the Chinese have used both the arguments.
How do you think then, Kamal Sibal, India should play it? As you said, the Prime Minister has unequivocally condemned the acts of terror that have taken place. How should India, though, play it, given the fact that we want to also be conscious of our relationship with the Islamic world, more moderate nations within the region? How should India play it? Because you're even hearing from the Saudis. The Saudis are very clear now. They are not willing to in any way reach out to Israel. They are standing up for now, at least with the moderate Palestinians. How should India play it?
Look, it is not for the Prime Minister to make the kind of statement which the Foreign Ministry should make on the political issue. And that's where the two-state solution comes in, which we have supported, which has been passed by the United Nations umpteen times. Now let's wait what the External Affairs Ministry says, which then can put the whole thing in a political perspective. But what Prime Minister was very eager to mark as a point in pursuit of his larger policy of developing an international consensus on terrorism, that no cause justifies the use of terrorism, and
he
there has to
probably
be
should have
zero
put his phone on silent
of terrorism, and the world should progressively accept this. Now, that was limited to that. So that is one aspect. The other is that even the statement by the UAE I've seen is very moderate. It talks about avoiding civilian casualties on both sides. There's no recrimination, there's no condemnation of Israel. Likewise, in the case of Saudi Arabia, there's no condemnation
but there's
Israel.
no condemnation of Hamas either. There's no condemnation. There's no condemnation of Hamas.
No, sorry, I meant Hamas. I didn't mean
Yes.
Israel. No condemnation of Hamas. Even in the Saudi statement, there's no condemnation of Hamas. All they've said is that the talks that were going on between Saudi Arabia and United States to build some bridges between Saudi Arabia and Israel, they have been called off. Now, if these conservative Arab monarchies are taking a middle-of-the-road position, I think India will align its views and thinking with those statements, because we have now developed very close relations with both UAE and Saudi Arabia, and therefore we don't have to take a position which is out of line with the Arab monarchies, so as to preserve our interests with them, as well as in this case of Israel, we have very vital interests in Israel, and we have a firm position against terrorism, which affects Israel's security. So we will also try and preserve our relationship with Israel, and Israel is very happy and satisfied with the statement that has come from our side. But there are some bigger issues which you mentioned, which are very important in terms of how we go forward, which is the ITU2, which is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. All this will be put on hold. And then there are the issue of oil prices and pressures like that. Actually, the whole situation has got terribly disturbed.
So therefore we are looking
stability in the region.
We are looking at, therefore, KC Singh, in conclusion, at an extreme complex, complicated situation. There are, this isn't a situation where we can easily navigate by taking a firm stand one way or the other. Is India going to have to, as we did with Ukraine and Russia, have to play a delicate balancing act, or is it very clear that we've got Hamas to be seen as the enemy here and try and establish some kind of a solidarity against any terror group like Hamas using violence to target innocent civilians? Will we be able to, how do we navigate this politically in the months ahead?
No, as Mr. Sibal said, I think politically you will have to retain your old position, which is you will have to talk of the two-nation principle, because a solution has to be found. You can't carry on like this. What Hamas has done is terrorism, or whatever you call it. They have put the Palestinian issue back on the global agenda. It's something which had been forgotten. They disrupted everything the Americans were about to do in the region. They have reconfigured many of the equations. And don't forget, the Arab street will get affected by this. An Egyptian policeman has shot 2 Israeli tourists in Egypt. So there is certain anger which will filter through the Arab street. And this will start affecting the rulers, many of the rulers who were thinking, including Emirates. Emirates can take whatever position they want, but I think Saudis have a much larger population and are more sensitive to the Arab street. I think over the next few weeks, depending on how things go in the Gaza Strip, ideally, if Qatar can get an exchange done, if a halt can be called, prisoners can be exchanged, I think then you can start de-escalating. But that is really the ideal situation. I don't think it may be possible. Other than that, the worse the situation gets in Gaza, if the Israeli army has to go in and go house to house, searching for the abducted people and for the leadership of the Hamas, sooner or later you'll see the ripples in the Arab world and the Islamic world. They will not ignore it.
Those are words which I think need to be taken with great seriousness. It's important to understand in a way that this is a complex issue. It didn't begin this weekend. It has a long and tortured history. At the same time, a red line must be drawn when groups like Hamas use terror to try and respond to what they call is Israel's illegal occupation of their lands. We'll wait and see how this plays out, but clearly this is going to rumble for a long time yet. I appreciate my guests joining me both from Israel as well as here in India. Thank you very much. Let me turn for a moment and take a breath and look at the big story back home, where it is the big election, the final election before the mega 2024 polls, and the bugle has been sounded. The Election Commission of India announcing the schedule for the upcoming 5 state assembly polls, Mizoram, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Telangana, polling to take place between the 7th of November and the 30th of November, with counting on a Sunday, the 3rd of December. Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan will have single-phase polls, but Chhattisgarh will poll twice on November 7th and 20th. Rajasthan on November 23rd, Madhya Pradesh 17th, and finally Telangana on the 30th of November. Counting will be held on the 3rd of December for all the 5 states. Remember, these are elections where both the Congress and the BJP have much at stake. Okay, we'll keep, of course, tracking what happens on the election front, but I want to turn to tonight's Get Real India story, where a shocking video of 3 Bihar policemen throwing a dead body of an unidentified person into a canal in the state's Muzaffarpur district has caused great outrage. The entire incident took place in broad daylight, was captured on a mobile by a passerby. It's our Get Real India story from Muzaffarpur.
This video from Muzaffarpur in Bihar has sparked outrage on the internet. The viral video shows 3 policemen dumping a dead body into a canal. Citizens took to social media in large numbers to criticize the Bihar police, calling the act disgusting and inhuman. The police, however, seemed to defend the action initially. Following the outrage, the body was taken out of the canal and is now kept at the morgue. The police driver and 2 home guards from the duty have been suspended.
इस वीडियो में दिख रहे तीनों पुलिसकर्मी को प्रथम दृष्टया दोषी पाते हुए इनके विरुद्ध कार्रवाई भी हमने गंभीरता से की। चालक सिपाही को जो पुलिस का है उसको निलंबित कर दिया गया।
Police are also proving the authenticity of the viral video. Bureau Report, India Today.
Troubling story there. Let's take a break. When we return, we're turning to good news today. A young man's jugadu caught to an automobile invention.
Don't really care about that, bro.
يعني ما سبق انه حدا رن علينا قالوا اخلي في حاجه حواليك، رنينا على الدفاع المدني اجى يطلعنا في الساعه 4:30 تقريبا، اجى طلعنا الدفاع المدني من البيت لانه احنا كنا الصراحه مش عارفين ننزل، حديد ووالدي كان متصاب في راسه. الحمد لله رب العالمين زي ما انتم شايفين ما في.
Is perusing once more its very high granting of funds to the Palestinians, and this is something that I'm surprised to see it, and I'm happy to see it in the same manner. I think that there needs to be reprisal and re-evaluation. One, obviously, of Iran, which is a very manipulative player in the region, a huge destabilizing force, and it's not only for Israel and Qatar. There is a huge destabilizing issue that they've been manipulating for years. And if we needed to be the guinea pig, and that is exactly what happened, the world needs to wake up.
Jack.
Well, I want to go back to the information published by AP. Associated Press is a very serious business, very serious media, and I think that they would not dare publish such an information without having sources. And I think that we are just challenging them, and we are to wait to see how AP will explain what happened. This is not the first time that such a thing happened. Remember, in 1973, King Hussein came and met Golda, and he told her, the Arabs are going, Egypt and Syria are going to attack you. And she said, look, one moment. She took the phone and spoke to somebody and said, okay, thank you. This is not serious.
Okay.
By the way, Laura, the Hamas and Iran are saying very clearly, as does the Hezbollah, what they are planning to do. Gaza first, West Bank second, the North and Hezbollah third. They are very, very clear in Arabic about what they intend to do and what is their game plan.
Okay, both of you, please do stay with us because, we're talking a lot in the abstract perhaps, but I mean, it is an absolute unthinkable nightmare for any human being to have your family members taken by terrorists into enemy territory. And in some cases, in the last few days, Hamas have taken entire families. Many, many Israelis are suffering that agony right now. One of them, I'm very sad to say, Sharon Calderon, Sharon's cousin Ofer, was taken along with his 11-year-old son Erez, his 16-year-old daughter Sar, and the children's grandmother Carnella, another cousin Noya, was also taken. It's very hard, Sharon. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. Can you tell us a bit about your family and what happened?
Well,
Lauren, are you able
Saturday,
to hear me? Am I audible?
We woke up at 6:30 in the morning to alarm. We have a lot of alarms. We live next to the Gaza
We're going
Street.
to try and
the alarm
reconnect
tells us
with
to
Lauren
get into a
Isaac,
safe
who's an
place because
activist.
there is bombs. So we got into the safe place, and then the terrorist attack started. We had in our village was full of terrorists that was shouting and were shooting and killing and just destroy everything and get into houses and knocking on our doors and windows and yelling that I'm here to kill you. We'll never see a daylight again. We were like this 24 hours, almost 24 hours. In our next village, the Ofer lived with his daughter and his son, daughter Sahar and his son Erez. And the terrorists got into their house, and then they decided to go out through the window and run away.
Israel government has decided to go on the offensive, and how? They've now decided to cut off electricity, food and water as well as far as Gaza is concerned.
Hiding in the bushes, and they're very afraid, and the terrorist is very close to them. And since then, we didn't hear anything from them. We don't know anything, if they're okay, if they're not. Later, we discovered that also Carmela and Noya are not there. And that's it. Since then, we didn't hear anything from them, except one video that the Hamas posted when Erez they're taking one of the terrorists.
We're looking at pictures of your beautiful family right now, and I hope the world is seeing these images, and we all feel your pain.
They're beautiful family, I know. They're our family, and we don't know anything about them. We don't know if they're alive, if someone killed them, if someone took them. We don't know if they use them, if they behave nice, if they taking care of them.
Yeah.
If they're abusing them, we don't know anything. No one tell us anything.
It's everyone's absolute worst nightmare. My heart really goes out to you, Sharon. Have you been given any advice? What are the authorities telling you?
No one tell us anything. Everyone is very busy right now. But the most important thing to remember that there are a lot of people that took the terrorists took with them to the Gaza Strip. We don't know anything about them. They have to come back home.
I'll be right back.
Because now we know that most of them alive. We don't know how longer they will be alive. We want our family back. We want all the people here back. Look at them. They're so beautiful, but we don't know what's with them. We don't know if they're alive. We don't know anything.
Sharon,
imagine to yourself, but you're sitting on Saturday morning at home, and there are terrorists outside shooting and yelling, and they want to take us. They wanted to take our life. So we are here and we're thankful for that. But we have family that doesn't. So please help us bring them back.
Are you, Sharon? You have family with you? There are people with you?
Yeah. My son, my husband, and my sons are here with me. We are okay physically. But that's it, because we're broken. We don't know if we can go back home. We don't know if we have a home.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on over there. Right now, the government took us to Eilat. We're here staying in a hotel with the clothes that we have on us, and that's it.
It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Listen, I'm a mother myself, and I can't quite get my head around what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. It's very, very hard.
It was terrible 24 hours. It was terrible 48 hours, and we don't know how longer it's going to be. It's not going to end quickly, but please, please, please help us to bring our family back. This is all that we wanted. Leave the house, leave the cars, leave everything. Just want our family here.
Of course. Sharon, we are praying for you. We're praying for your family. We hope they're safe and that they return to you. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, it happened in Sderot, in the south of Israel, a city that was under full Hamas control for many hours. And when the Israeli forces arrived, they found the bloodied bodies of civilians piled up in the streets, men, women, children. The IDF's now back in control of that city. Our Jonathan Regev is there now. Jonathan, very, very hard scenes in Sderot.
Very hard scenes in Sderot, very hard scenes all over the roads here. These are roads, I've been here, I think, in the past few years, at least 50 times. I've been here around the roads. I've never, ever seen the roads here like this, full of debris, full of cars, full of bodies, full of everything inhumane. That's what this part of the beautiful state of Israel looks like today, and has been looking like for the past 48 hours. Since basically Saturday morning, more than 48 hours by now, 60 hours or so. And the army is basically in control of the area. There are no more, as far as the army knows, there are no more Hamas terrorists in the communities, but you never know who can be hiding behind some tree or some in the house. Maybe houses are booby-trapped. Many things are unclear. That is why the army is not yet willing to say that it's in full control, because you don't know who may be walking around here on the roads in the many communities here along the Gaza border. And clearly a very sad and difficult scene here today, and unfortunately for the days to come.
Is there a heavy troop presence in the city right now?
Very heavy troop presence in the city itself and all across the Gaza border community. First, trying to make sure that there are no more terrorists in Israeli territory, and then in preparation for the next stage of this war, post-ground incursion. No one really knows for sure. There are also constant barrages of rockets, mostly to the communities here around, being mostly to Sderot, to Ashkelon. We've also seen rockets sent further away still today to the Tel Aviv area, to the Jerusalem area, and a very heavy presence of troops here, absolutely.
And of course, this is a city, it's close to Gaza. For many, many years, they've been dealing with horrific rocket attacks, but nothing could have prepared them for what happened in the last few days. All of it filmed, uploaded to social media by the terrorists themselves. How are people dealing with that? How are survivors dealing with that?
It's a terrible feeling. Basically, I think the people of Sderot and the communities, and not only them, they're feeling that they've been lied to, because they were told that basically the army is ready to deal with everything. There's a fence which on paper was impossible to cross. There's an underground barrier there is an overhead barrier, there is a fence, and everything that should have prevented crossings, or maybe you cannot, they were told, all right, you cannot prevent 100% of crossings, but you can prevent most of them, and even if someone crosses, the army will very fast be in the area and react. Both of these concepts were proved absolutely wrong. The border fence was simply crossed all over the Gaza border. The army was very slow to react, and we're now dealing with terrible consequences of this. You just spoke with people from the communities. You saw for yourself what it feels like. Huge numbers of the people living in the communities are killed or kidnapped. So the situation for them is
the craziest
is
thing about this whole thing.
And
Look
even after
down
all
here.
this
Let me
ends,
blow this.
a week or a month from today, the situation here will never ever be the same as it was before Saturday morning.
Absolutely.
So this is a live view
Jonathan,
from
thank you very much.
the Gaza Strip
Jonathan
here.
there in
Look at
Sderot
all the
with some
people
of
just
the
driving
worst
like
atrocities
it's a
ever
normal
committed
day.
on
There's
Israeli
active
soil
war in their
happened
city, and they're just fucking
3
going
days
back
ago.
and forth to work, going shopping
Well,
like it's a normal fucking
Israelis,
day.
Before we go to the north, because there is a situation in the north as well. Jacques, I mean,
That's
it's
crazy
hard to
shit,
imagine.
man.
Will people go back to Sderot?
I
Do you
guess
think
if
the
you-
city can
if
ever
you just
recover
get
from
used
this?
to
This is a city that has suffered so much.
Being
over
around
the
war
years.
your whole
I
life,
think
you're just fucking used
most
to
of
it, man.
us, not only the people of Sderot, most of us will suffer
Hey,
from
we're being
post-trauma.
attacked by another country.
Because
Let's
this
go
is
to
the
fucking 7-Eleven and get a
explosion of myth.
Slurpee. What the
This
fuck?
is an explosion of a concept that the border could be protected by a fence. And the concept just dissipated. And we were proved wrong. We also were proved wrong by saying that we have to contain Hamas. We have
Still
to
missing this morning.
15,000
That
Gazans
sucks,
had work
okay.
permits just a week ago.
Not only that, we have to contain Hamas. We have to please Hamas. We have to speak with Hamas. We have to maybe to in order to just enhance Hamas and giving a better position vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. We have to weaken the Palestinian Authority so we can, and we have with our own hands nourished the monster on our border. And this is what the price of our foolish and stupid policy.
Ruth?
I completely agree. You know, the feeding the monster by Qatar in terms of money is a complete wrong policy. Hamas is a terrorist
You know, it's funny, people here in America talk about how it's fucking horrible here, and you have people, you know, across the ocean that have to deal with this on their whole lives. It's insane.
Their own interests that have absolutely nothing to do with the Palestinians themselves, but rather seeking hegemony over the region and destabilizing the region. One can see it in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, in the West Bank, and they are trying very hard to do that amidst the Arab Israelis in Israel until now with not huge success, but they are trying, they continue to try. And that's how they work, destabilizing the region. This is a very bad policy to have followed. And as I said before, Qatar and Iran need to be dealt with, because it's not just a destabilizing force for Israel, but rather for the whole Western world, not to mention Arab countries that seek stability in the Arab Gulf and in the region like Egypt and so on.
Ruth,
Yeah, right. Nowhere to go. Where the fuck are you going to go?
But thank you so much for joining us. Ruth Wasserman there.
Thank you.
Well, as Israel continues to battle Hamas in Gaza and in southern Israel, a new threat has opened up in the north. 2 terrorists infiltrated from Lebanon today. They were neutralized.
I definitely believe that,
IDF
David.
forces.
There's
Well, our
definitely,
correspondent Hamda Salhout is there. We're having trouble
yeah,
getting hold of her right
definitely
now.
going towards World War
Jacques
III.
Valliere, you are a
Ukraine
Lebanon
being the
expert.
first step.
Yes.
The nightmare scenario, isn't it? That the
Well, it was expected. This was expected, and I think that the Hamas has just disturbed the Hezbollah plans. Because in fact what we have seen done by Hamas is a repetition of the action plan of Hezbollah. If you remember, 2 months ago there was a drill in South Lebanon where the Hezbollah showed his units, the Radwan units, blowing up the obstacle and just riding.
And there's a big problem too. Let me turn that down for a minute. Problem is you got all of these guys from Hamas coming over from Iran, and Iran like supporting these guys.
We were surprised. On the other hand, Hezbollah cannot surprise us anymore.
Well, just to point out, just in the last minute or so, Hezbollah has threatened retaliation because of the shooting of the 2 terrorists, because one of them was a Hezbollah.
I guarantee Trump wouldn't have bowed. Well, he probably would have bowed out of respect.
Whatever we do, it's tick for tack.
I guess it's
we have
a cultural thing.
An area in South Lebanon, he will attack an area in northern Israel, and I think that we threw a chair. He will throw a closet, and we are in war. So
I personally don't know much about the conflict over there. That's why this is all interesting to me.
Aggressive attitude of Hezbollah.
I mean, I knew there was conflict over there, but I didn't realize how bad it was getting.
What we see right now is from the
it's hard to
point of view is that
it's hard to fucking to know about all the shit going down in the fucking world right now, because it's going down everywhere.
Comes and introduces himself in the arena, and I think that the ones who understood that very well were the Americans. The American administration just sent a warning to Iran, say just leave Israel with Hamas, don't mess around, and just to make them the serious move was to move the strike force with the air carrier, with the fleet around this, and of course announcing the supply of ammunition and of missiles to Israel in order to replenish its depots.
Yeah, David, money.
Jacques, stay with us. Dr. Barak Books is with us as well. He's a senior research fellow at the Europa Institute.
It's true.
With us,
everybody calls on America, right?
Do you think Hezbollah is biding its time?
It feels like any other day.
To get involved, and can the IDF deal with the 2 threats at the same time?
I can say this is the $1 million question. Hezbollah, meanwhile, until the last incursion, had done some symbolic gestures in order to see that it sympathizes with the Hamas. We're now at the end of a very
Are you fucking serious, bro?
Terrorists. One of them, according to the reports, fled to Lebanon.
Come on, man.
And I saw the radio of Lebanon, Voice of Lebanon, reporting of significant and hard Israeli bombings of villages in South Lebanon. This is a report from 5 o'clock. And according to reports, a commander of Hezbollah was killed. And now this is the time to see whether Hezbollah will linger and widen the fighting, or
I just seen an explosion in the top right-hand corner.
Do you think that the presence of the
top left-hand corner,
aircraft carrier fleets in the Eastern Mediterranean will deter Hezbollah at all?
The U.S. is involved with the gas agreement, and only at the end of August and September, Amos Hochstein was
the screens on the bottom right and the top left, them are the live views.
Implementation of the agreement. And at that time, they began digging the gas rig. They call it the research digging, which is due to be finished in a week or 2. Now, there are processes of stabilization in Lebanon, also support of the U.S. and Western countries of the Lebanese army in order to maintain order. The U.S. Last act is a part of that in order to promote stability and maybe to pressure Iran not to intervene and Hezbollah not to act.
Jacques, do you agree with that?
Well, I see that there is a plan, a grand design of Hezbollah that has been expressed several months ago, and if you remember, we had the Minister of Defense who was sacked from his position because he said the truth, that Hezbollah was in fact uniting fronts around Israel, trying to put a siege around Israel from the northern border in the West Bank and in Gaza, and maybe also in Yemen and Iran. And our Prime Minister just sacked him, and he was just called back because of the protests. We saw also the Commission of Foreign Affairs and Security refusing to sit with two generals, Israeli generals, who were supposed to explain them what was the danger.
I didn't even know there was such thing. Let me turn that down for a sec. I didn't know there was even such thing as this the Iron Dome until I seen it, and I was like, holy shit, what the fuck?
Only a week ago, according to intelligence in Lebanon, Ka'ani, the head of the Quds force, is there. So we remember in the Lebanese Second War that Qasem Soleimani was sitting near Hassan Nasrallah and directing the battles against Israel. So we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised.
Can the IDF deal with these two conflicts?
Well, I always say in 1948 we were attacked by five Arab armies: Lebanese, Syrian, Iraqi, the Jordanian, and Egyptian. And we were barely 600,000. We just stood on several fronts and we survived. This is what we are today. We have just called reservists 300,000. 300,000. So half of it could be sent to Gaza, and maybe less than that could be sent to the Lebanese front. We can withhold, there's no problem at all for the Israeli army to conduct a war on two fronts.
You know what the whole shitty thing about it, David, is we're all busy fighting wars over in these other countries, and we can't even control our own fucking war, the war that we have here in America. We can't even control our own borders, let alone go and fight for somebody else's borders.
Jack, and on the threat from Lebanon, do you think that the U.S. strategy has been solid enough up to now?
I think that the U.S.
surprise wars. There's no such thing as a surprise war. The only people being surprised are the people being attacked.
But the thing is that Hezbollah on the Lebanese ground has its own independent decision making. He can always consult with Tehran, but the ultimate decision is Hezbollah. So if he feels that he has not only to express solidarity, but to react, and because he needs to have some credibility. He always said that if Israel attack us, we will attack. If Israel does this, we will do that. And this is the case today. We have attacked Hezbollah positions. A commander of Hezbollah was killed. So what can we expect? That he sends us flowers?
Do you think people in Beirut are worried tonight?
I think that, look, according to information from South Lebanon,
that's a joke as well, David.
Movement of population from the south
definitely term
Beirut,
limits, man. Fucking term limits. And
maybe
goddamn age requirements. Jesus fucking Christ. We shouldn't have 80-year-old motherfuckers running this country.
If they want to survive, they should be in Beirut.
Thanks very much, Jack. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us. Thank you. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away.
I don't want to hear your stupid commercial. Let's see what these... I'm going to go down to the bottom middle and see what these people are talking about down here. I got to go grab a new drink too, so I'll be right back.
Back them, but this is the situation at this point, and it's very, very fluid. The Israeli forces are targeting not just targets in Gaza. There is also fear of the war spilling towards Lebanon and the border with Lebanon, given the latest instances that we saw of Hezbollah also targeting Israelis there. So it's a very, very fluid situation at this point. And with more reports coming in of a potential Iranian hand, although Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, said that they do not have proof of Iran's involvement, more and more reports point to an Iranian hand and how this was planned and executed with support from the Iranian agencies. So this is going to get more complicated in the days ahead.
And Iran on its part has come out and, of course, outrightly denied these claims. The reports that are emerging of how they conspired, how they orchestrated this entire attack that has, at last count, claimed at least over 700 lives. Unfortunately, the fighting is only going to intensify there. And speaking of Benjamin Netanyahu, many pin the blame on him and the intelligence failure, Palki, that we are seeing there. It is... of course, people there were caught by surprise, but the attack in itself shouldn't have been a surprise, is what many analysts believe.
Well, there is no doubt that this was an intelligence failure, Poonam. Any way you look at it, this was a colossal failure of Israeli intelligence. Was it hubris? Was it overconfidence that led to this humiliation? They've ordered an investigation to figure out what went wrong. But this is a country that prides itself in having a very, very strong and robust intelligence mechanism. They are the strongest army in West Asia. They warded off attacks in the past. They are surrounded by hostile neighbors, and they have been surrounded by hostile neighbors since the inception of the Israeli state. Given this history, given the fact that they were heading into a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia that would have unsettled a lot of regional players, the fact...
Okay, enough of that, lady. Let's go back up here.
Terrorists, that figure is expected to be higher. Entire families have been kidnapped and taken to Gaza. The IDF is fighting back with airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, and there is a new threat from the north. Hezbollah has threatened retaliation for a deadly border flare-up. Two terrorists infiltrated from Lebanon. Hamda Salhoud is at the border with Lebanon. Hamda, what's the latest?
Laura, several Israeli strikes happening within Lebanese territory. One Hezbollah operative has been killed, and sources are indicating that Hezbollah will respond, quote, within the rules of deterrence. Now, senior Israeli officials are saying that Iran actually pushed Hamas to start this conflict. We do know that they were in contact, but as to how much the coordination between them is still unclear. But the same report is also indicating that Iran is telling Hezbollah to be prepared for the conflict. At the same time, Palestinian factions operating out of southern Lebanon are saying that they're ready to fight if Hezbollah takes the lead on the operation. The infiltration today happening at the border, resulting in the injury of at least 6 Israeli soldiers, was at the hands of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, one of those factions who's operating in southern Lebanon, who says that they are ready to fight.
Civilians in Beirut are moving to the north of Lebanon in anticipation of some kind of Israeli offensive. Do you have any information?
Right. So both the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army are encouraging citizens who live near the border area to move out of fear of a wider conflict and escalation. Hezbollah targets are all over southern Lebanon, and it's kind of unclear where Israel will hit next if they do. So the authorities there are asking Lebanese citizens to move. Coming out of Lebanon as well, fears of a wider escalation going deeper into Lebanese territory. The Lebanese people are suffering on a wide variety of scales, both economically, and on the home front, a lot of issues they have with their own government. So a war on their own territory is something they're extremely afraid of. The accounts from Lebanese citizens today of fear and of the unknown because of the continuation of the threat along the northern border.
Oh, absolutely,
Here, the Israeli
David.
military reinforcing the area with dozens of tanks and other types of military vehicles that we saw in a convoy, a heavy presence of the Israeli military, a lot of reinforcement troops on foot brought in, really patrolling almost every area, blocking off roads that lead closer to the border where you can hear some of that shelling, artillery, and mortar fire happening. But as of now, both Israelis and Lebanese on both sides of the border encouraged by their own authorities to move away from the area.
Okay, thank you, Hamda. Hamda Salhoud there in the north. Jacques, we're getting a report.
Yeah, I know. There was anti-tank firing from Hezbollah towards Israeli vehicles and positions. This is the second time in the 24 hours. The first one was the anti-tank firing against positions in the Har Dov, in the mountains, and now this happens again. I mean, but this is not the end of it. This is not the end of it. Hezbollah, yes, Hezbollah is preparing its retaliation, and this will come during the night, certainly. I mean, we will have to wait for that, because it is a situation that Hezbollah cannot accept. Its credibility is at stake here, and Hassan Nasrallah has to act. And unfortunately, this could develop into a full gear war between us and Hezbollah. And this is one of the explanations of such a possible flare-up is the fact that UNIFIL has left its positions. They were deployed along the border, and they left. They left. That means that, I mean, like the Russians at the time in Egypt and the Russian advisors in Syria, they left. Why? Because of the war. So the UNIFIL has information that something is going to happen on this border, and this something is only a confrontation with Israel.
All right, Jacques. Thank you very much, Jacques Neria there. Well, not a lot of good news for you tonight, but some consolation for people here in these very dark days, and that is the way Israelis have been pulling together in recent days, dealing with absolutely horrendous, traumatic news. But they are pulling together, they're getting aid packages together, they're helping people in the south. I'm joined in the studio by Aviv Gvili. You're the co-founder of an organization called Hamal, right? And you're helping citizens, survivors in the south of Israel. Tell us about that.
Focusing on helping civilians come together. Because there are truly a lot of people who truly want to help because of all this
from each
situation.
other. Ramallah, particularly here, is a tourist destination. There's tourists who are actually stuck here as well, incredibly worried, staying in my hotel. I was speaking to a couple of them. They're like, we don't know what's going on. We can't get out of here. And it was interesting because they're getting almost a first-hand.
Thanks, Abe. Good to see you, bro.
Every single day.
Okay, Imran Khan joining us there from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thanks very much, Imran. Well, that was in the occupied West Bank where Palestinians live. This is Gaza, the besieged strip where 2.3 million Palestinians live. It looks calm at the moment, but on the ground, absolute chaos after a barrage of airstrikes lit up the night sky. They are still going on, just not quite in the same intensity as we've seen in the last couple of hours. Huge balls of fire lighting up the sky there in the Gaza Strip, which is completely densely populated with 2.3 million people living in large tower blocks that are being consistently targeted by these Israeli airstrikes. Let's recap some of the other developments that we're seeing on this day, day 3 of Israel's war against Gaza.
Damn.
These Israeli airstrikes have killed dozens of people. Some of them in
One
the
just
Jabalia
hit.
refugee camp.
I just seen another one hit on this live view. Right there.
Defense Minister saying a full blockade is being imposed.
Just got
on
hit again.
The enclave. Let's just listen to what it is like to have those airstrikes in Gaza.
I've just seen two now hit in this upper left-hand corner. I've seen 2 explosions now. And this is a live view.
There you can hear the drones flying overhead and the flashes you can see from the strikes as they hit the buildings. The explosions reverberating around the city so much that the camera shakes, and the flames rising up from the buildings as the devastation below takes hold. Extraordinary scenes there that we're seeing, the night sky in Gaza.
Got that right,
fire.
David. Money that we didn't have, bro.
Pounding the strip.
Money that we don't have.
Terrifying for people who live there, sheltering in place, but unable to leave. No one knowing next where the strike is going to hit.
Sounds like the wife just woke up. I'll be right back.
Residents have told us that the night is the most terrifying. And watching these pictures and hearing the boom of the explosions. It is easy to see why.
This is a very important
We're now listening
announcement
to Abu
and
Ubaidah,
warning
the
from
spokesman
Al-Qassam
for the military
brigades.
wing of Hamas.
We believe in our religious and moral ethics as expressed by our Chief of Staff in his announcement of Al-Aqsa Typhoon operation. We also believe in the tenets of our faith, Islam, preserving and safeguarding the lives of women and children and prisoners of war. However, in the face of indiscriminately attacking our residential areas, killing women, children, and elderly, and as our enemy does not understand the values or ethics, then we will speak to them in their own language. Over the past few hours, we suffered as a result of the harm inflicted on our brothers and sisters at the hands of the fascist, barbarian, Zionist attacks targeting residential buildings. Therefore, we decided to put an end to this. From this moment on, we announce that any targeting of innocent civilians without warning will be met, regretfully to say, by executing one of the hostages in our custody. And we will be forced to broadcast this execution. We regret this decision, but we hold the Zionist enemy and their leadership the responsibility for this. Now the ball is at your court. It is a final warning, and it is a final ultimatum. A statement by Al-Qassam Brigade on Monday, the 9th of October, 2023.
There we were listening to Abu Obaida, the spokesman for the Qassam Brigades. He is spokesman for the military wing of Hamas. He was speaking on Al Jazeera Arabic there, our sister channel, as we are watching these extraordinary pictures of the ongoing bombardment of the Gaza Strip by Israel. Let's bring in Mike Hanna. He is live for us at the White House. Mike, extraordinary statement there from Abu Obaida, the spokesman for the military wing of Hamas, issuing a final warning.
Indeed, yes. And so obviously it's something that is being closely monitored by the Biden administration and indeed by the Pentagon. They are attempting to get some intelligence in terms of what is happening and what to predict, given the massive intelligence failures that occurred both within Israel and obviously with their allies like the United States. So obviously the situation being very closely watched at present. Statements like this going out publicly are statements that will be analyzed both obviously within the Israel intelligence community, but also with assistance from the US intelligence body.
But Mike, what exactly can the US do at the moment? Everyone must be watching these pictures with absolute alarm. Let's just listen in for the moment for what it's like.
Well, what the US is doing at the moment is, as the Biden administration is doing, and that is offering its utmost support for Israel. There has, interestingly enough, at this stage been no call for restraint. Normally in these kind of crises, you have a support for Israel being expressed from the US administration, but most of the time there is also a call for restraint. Now, there has not been on this particular occasion, which is notable because some observers believe that this is essentially giving a green light to Israel to go ahead with whatever actions it wants to take against Gaza. And this is a very important point. The support for Israel within the US.
I was just reading a tweet. Says, breaking news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told President Joe Biden that Israel has no choice but to launch a ground operation in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu is quoted to say, "We have to go in. We can't negotiate now. We need to restore deterrence," Netanyahu said. The report claims that Biden did not push back against the PM. The footage, says, Air Force planes have been carrying out extensive attacks along the length and breadth of the Gaza Strip, wreaking havoc on Hamas terrorists. In just the last 3 hours, about 130 targets were attacked using dozens of planes. Interesting.
The reaction from Europe.
And we have a whole battle group heading over there at the moment.
Well, yeah, I think that most recent statement from the Al-Qassam brigades will create further outrage and condemnation from European leaders. The idea of executing hostages in return for any further strikes that hit civilian areas inside Gaza. Already we have heard that the leaders of Germany, France, the United States, Italy and the UK are going to be holding a conference call of some kind later on Monday evening. And we've also had from the European Union a decision to suspend all funding to Palestinian institutions and to the Palestinian Authority itself, the head of the European Commission's enlargement body.
Now, didn't we fund Hamas for years?
The scale of the terror and brutality against Israel and its people is a turning point, leading
some shady ass shit, man.
Of some $730 million worth of intended aid. Now that includes the kind of aid that the
You think they're going to drop a nuke on the whole place and just fucking wipe it out?
UNRWA, which runs refugee schools, among other things.
Jordan Peterson just tweeted that he had a dream. He had another dream of nuclear war.
Controlled by Fatah and not related to Hamas or its actions on Saturday, and the kind of fighting and the kind of killing of civilians that we saw on Saturday, which is the cause of such condemnation from EU leaders. There is something of a split. Germany and Austria also deciding to suspend their aid as well. Germany's projected aid for this year and next is $264 million. We're not sure how much of that first year has already been spent, but that is being suspended. Austria suspending $20 million. There is some debate within German political circles. Those on the left worried about punishing those inside the PA and Palestinians more generally, when it should be Hamas. They feel that should be held responsible for what took place on Saturday. Also some differences between countries. Spain says it is not supportive of this measure from the EU, and no plans, we're told, either from the Italians or the British in terms of suspending their aid.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us there from Europe and giving us the reaction there from Europe. These are the pictures that we are seeing from Gaza as the airstrikes continue.
Let me bring that back up.
Densely populated strip. We've been hearing ongoing bombardments, explosions, sirens, absolute chaos and terror reigning on the Gaza Strip. We are going to continue with our ongoing coverage of events there in Israel's war against Gaza. As the top of the hour approaches, it is now 1700 GMT, and these are the deadliest Israeli airstrikes on Gaza since the start of the war. Civilians, including women and children, are amongst the dead across the Strip.
See what these guys are talking about.
Hello there, I'm Laura Kyle. You're watching Al Jazeera and our ongoing coverage. Israel says it's the most intense series of airstrikes ever to be carried out against the territory. Israel's also said it's retaken control of areas attacked by Hamas as the armed group continues its barrage of rockets from Gaza towards Tel Aviv. And Israel deploys more troops to its northern frontier as Islamic Jihad claims responsibility for an incursion from neighboring Lebanon. It's 1700 GMT, 8 p.m. in Gaza, where Palestinian homes continue to be mercilessly targeted and pounded by airstrikes. An Israeli army spokesman has described it as the largest ever bombardment to hit the territory. And now we've just heard from the spokesman of the Hamas military wing. The group has threatened to take the lives of Israeli captives for every Palestinian civilian killed in the airstrikes. Now, a warning to to our viewers that these pictures of the aftermath of an earlier airstrike on the Jabalia refugee camp are disturbing. The besieged strip there is reported to have mass casualties from this earlier bombardment. In total, the earlier death toll was around 560 Palestinians. We expect that number to have gone up as the strip continues to have been pounded all throughout the day and night. 900 Israelis have been killed in the most serious escalation of violence the region has seen in decades. Israel has also declared a total blockade of the Gaza Strip, cutting off food, fuel, water and electricity. Tarek Abu Azoum is live for us in Gaza. Tarek, the strength, the intensity of the airstrikes that we've been seeing over the past hour or two is extraordinary. Try to explain to us, if you can, what it is like experiencing this on the ground.
Yeah, this is definitely a world war.
Well, the wave of the Israeli strikes continues in
I can turn that up.
Hitting different residential areas and governmental institutions during the past hours generally. Now, the Israeli occupation forces and officials said that the operations and the attacks on the Gaza Strip will not stop, even if the captive soldiers will be killed during these attacks. On the other hand, the spokesperson of the military wing of Hamas said that the Palestinian militant groups will put limitations to the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip by executing one Israeli captive in every single attack that might really cause such severe harm to the Palestinian civil front. And they say that the ball is right now on the court of the Israeli army as well. This is related to the latest updates that took place inside the Gaza Strip. Now, it's important to mention that the level of attacks inside the Gaza Strip has accelerated rapidly during the last hour. They have targeted, the Israeli occupation forces has targeted the Palestinian Ministry of Monetary and the Ministry of Transportation central the Gaza Strip, besides attacking different central roads, causing severe destruction for the civil infrastructure. Generally, the Gaza Strip citizens are suffering during these current moments. They have no electricity current, no clean water sources, with limited internet access. They experience drastic conditions amid the ongoing Israeli attacks. As you can clearly right now hear in the background, like from time to another, the Israeli air forces are targeting different areas on central the Gaza Strip. Their main concentration at the current moment is attacking the key places that could be used for services and even for providing health care for the Palestinians and the Gazans. These procedures taking and measurements taken by the occupation forces is to exert more pressure on the Palestinian militant groups in order to stop the attacks on the Israeli settlements as well. Now, in retaliation to the Israeli ongoing attacks, the Palestinian militant groups keeps firing barrages of rockets to the Israeli settlements, and they announced that they will keep doing that as long as the Israeli strikes will continue on the Gaza Strip.
Tarek, it's hard to imagine when we see these strikes all over the Gaza Strip.
America's too worried about everybody else's borders, JM, to worry about our own.
Well, right now there is no a completely safe place inside the Gaza Strip, because every single place in the Gaza Strip could be an easy target for the Israeli forces. Even the displaced, the shelters of the United Nations, which were schools that later turned to be shelters for displaced Palestinians who were displaced from the original houses due to the Israeli ongoing strikes, are not yet safe, because a school run by the United Nations has been targeted in the afternoon by the Israeli air forces. So clearly we can say that Palestinians are residing in the houses with no clear hope for waking up next day.
Tarek, where we know that Hamas has got more than 100 Israelis captive, soldiers, women, children, civilians. How easy would it be to hide them in Gaza, and how easy would it be to protect them from being killed in these airstrikes?
Well, these kind of secret procedures can be only taken by the responsible entities of these militant groups. Now, as Palestinians, they don't have any clear idea about the way that those captives could be hidden, as simply was made with the former Israeli captives, Gilad Shalit, who was kidnapped from the Israeli-Palestinian borders in 2006.
Right, okay.
So the
Be careful,
Palestinian
my
militant
friend.
groups are using the Israeli captives as winning cards in order to get their demands and even to prick the will of fight for the Israeli occupation forces.
Okay, Tarek Abu Azum, thanks very much for bringing us the latest from the ground in Gaza. And just to remind our viewers, if you're just joining us, that this is the skyline, the nighttime skyline of the Gaza Strip, where we can see buildings on fire after a barrage of strikes that have been pounding the Strip, pounding the residential areas, the buildings, the mosques. Any area seems to be a legitimate target in this most intense of bombings. People on the ground telling us that this is the most extreme they've ever felt, and they have lived through a number of these aerial bombardments there on the Gaza Strip. It is nighttime. Hardly any electricity can be seen, only the glow of fires, the aftermath of airstrikes onto the buildings. Well, just a little earlier, the Jabalia camp, the largest of 8 refugee camps in the Strip, and it was densely populated with more than 116,000 refugees, was also struck by an airstrike. And not too far away is a UN-run elementary school, though it was not impacted. It's still not clear how many people died in that incident in Jabalia, but we saw some horrific pictures of people being carried away from the scene of that strike. And there you can see, once again, a huge explosion on Gaza. Unrelenting strikes there into the night on the Gaza Strip. Tamara Al-Rafai is the spokeswoman for UNRWA, and she says some of the schools set up as shelters in Gaza have been damaged by Israeli strikes.
Many people have sought shelter in UNRWA schools. My colleague in Gaza just told me that up to 137,000 displaced people are now seeking refuge in 83 UNRWA schools. It is worth reminding that UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, runs a network of 278 schools in Gaza. Many of them we can turn into shelters overnight if needed. And this is what's happening now. People are looking for that blue flag. For them, the blue of the UN is a sign of safety, and they're taking their families there. International humanitarian law is very, very clear. All UN installations and buildings and schools are protected by the warring parties. No one is allowed to attack them. Now, unfortunately, 14 of our buildings have already sustained damage since yesterday, including one of our schools. Now, luckily, no one died of this. So while in most conflicts,
I'll probably do news later tonight,
our installations and the blue protects us and protects people who come to our buildings, we do have incidents, and to anticipate that or to avoid it, rather, we share the GPS of our locations with all the parties in order to alert them to our presence in different places.
Let's speak now to Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, Marwan Bashawa. He joins us live from Paris. Marwan, there's plenty to unpack here. First of all, let's talk about the spokesman for the Qassam Brigades, that's the armed wing of Hamas, Abu Ubaidah. He spoke just a short time ago and gave a stark warning that they will begin executing civilian captives. And remember, viewers will remember that they have taken more than 100 people from Israel, some of them soldiers, some of them civilians, some of them children. They will begin executing as civilian captives in return for any new Israeli bombing on civilian housing without warning. What do you make of this?
I hope he's just bluffing. We know from the past that Hamas has really took care of its captives rather well. We know that especially from the capture of Gilad Shalit for years. When he was released just as he was captured. This is clearly also a sign that the situation is getting quite desperate, and that, of course, Hamas is under more and more pressure to react to the ongoing bombardment and onslaught on the civilian population of Gaza. Now, clearly, if you notice, there's a pattern here, and it's nothing abnormal. It's quite actually the norm. For every action, there is a reaction. And generally speaking, in this conflict, we've noticed quite clearly that the greater the oppression, the greater the use of force against the Palestinian, the uglier the Palestinian resistance had become over the years, simply because there's a synergy between the two. And Israel and its chiefs of intelligence over the years have warned us all, warned Israeli politicians in particular, that one of the greatest source of extremism, aside from racism and illegal settlements and all of that, is the excessive use of force, is the so-called collateral damage. That nothing makes the Palestinians as extreme and as violent as much as the excessive use of force by Israel. And here we see, right after the gruesome images that we've seen in southern Israel, Israel is responding with more of the same. It's quite astounding that Israel accuses the Palestinians of terrorism and then responds with barbarism.
Indeed. And as you said earlier, Hamas, I mean, it's sort of pushed itself into this rather desperate situation because it launched this extraordinary attack on Israel, caused a huge number of casualties, caught Israel completely by surprise. This on our screen is what we're seeing to be Israel's retaliation. It is not holding back. So what more can Hamas do now? Is this the end of it?
The thing is about 100 or 200 years of history of this sort of asymmetrical warfare is that the weaker party, and in this case Hamas, usually takes certain measures that provoke the stronger party, in this case the Israeli occupation, to take extraordinary measures of excessive use of force, which in turn alienates the population at large and makes them ever more steadfast, angry, hateful, and more violent in support of their representatives. I don't know exactly if Hamas has thought through what it has done over the weekend, but there's a pattern here in all such asymmetrical conflicts whereby the weaker party does provoke. I mean, because it's invisible to the enemy, to the greater power, in this case Israel, because Palestinians have become invisible over the past many years. In fact, when Prime Minister Netanyahu appeared at the United Nations and redrew a new map of the Middle East according to his own fancy, he completely omitted the Palestinians from the Middle East. And the Palestinians' response has been to make themselves visible once again in the ugliest of ways, it has to be said. And now Israel is responding with more of the same, as if no lessons are learned. And once again, it's meeting what it calls terrorism with this sort of barbarism. And that is not going to lead to the end of anything. That's just going to lead to a new beginning, making the Palestinians angrier, more violent, more hostile, more vengeful. And clearly the likes of Hamas are going to become even more extreme. When militants, when the average Palestinian or the average any person loses their loved ones, just like the heads of Hamas, as we know their own personal pedigrees, they, in their most part, have lost their loved ones, sons and daughters and wives and so on and so forth. They have become more bitter, more violent. So Israel has
so this basically boils down
over the years, and we know
Jews
from 2008, 2009,
Palestinians?
2012, and 2021, and now 4 wars. Israel uses excessive force, but it doesn't bring more moderate Palestinians to the fore. It doesn't make Palestinian leadership or Hamas leadership or Jihad leadership more moderate. It's exactly the contrary. Palestinians are becoming more radicalized. Their leadership more hostile and more violent. And by the way, the same dynamic is happening inside Israel as well, because the occupation and the excessive use of force is eating Israel from the inside. And that was predicted by one of Israel's leading philosophers right after the 1967 war. 55 years ago, when the occupation started, he said, we are going to become Shabak state. We're going to become an intelligence state. And we're going to become an apartheid state.
Oh, hell yes,
and we, as occupiers, will eventually, in his words, will become a Nazi state. That's
this is definitely, this is
after
definitely.
the 1967 war. And his predictions are coming through.
Because they know that America has to have its fingers in everything.
And Israeli violence is breeding Palestinian violence and Israeli violence. It's leading extremism on both sides. So this cycle of retaliation is not making anyone more moderate and is not making anyone disappear. It's just making two populations ever more hostile to one another, leading to ever more violence against each other.
Marwan, many thanks indeed. As you say that, we are seeing the results of that increasing levels, escalating levels of violence from either side. This escalation is unlike any other seen in the Gaza Strip. The pounding of the buildings there, constant since the sun went down about 2 hours ago. Every few moments, a new explosion, a new ball of fire going up into the air. It's hard to imagine anywhere in the Gaza Strip that is safe tonight from these airstrikes. Meanwhile, we've got Israel saying it's sending military reinforcement into southern Israel. It's called up 300,000 reservists and is preparing for a major ground assault. The military is reporting it's retaken control of border towns, which were overrun by Hamas fighters from Saturday morning. The army says some of the areas have experiencing some isolated fighting, which is ongoing.
I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we act accordingly.
Okay,
I kind of wanted to
get some more from
I wanted to get a view of see what it looked like, because I don't
Sarah,
even know what the area looks like.
Time we spoke that we are expecting to hear from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was expected to speak about 20 minutes ago. What was the latest you're hearing there?
So this is the 1950
That's right.
armistice agreement
He should be speaking
line.
in about 10 minutes from now. It's going to be an address to the public. This in the last 24 hours, we've been hearing a lot more from the military in terms of their plans moving forward. Still not clear whether, the question has always been, is there going to be foots and boots on the ground sent in? That's still not clear yet. There's been no talk about that. But as our colleague Charlie Stratford, who's been reporting from that southern border, has been saying all day, is that he has a lot of war experience. He's been saying he's been seeing those tanks going past, those all the indications of sending all their resources to that border from around the country. Of course, those 300,000 reservists that they've called up on is not just from within Israel. Those are reservists and people that have maybe used to be in the military that have decided to stay registered. They may live abroad. They've been coming back here, and all of those are ready and prepared for the next step, whatever that is that the Israeli government decides to take. Now, there's a lot of firsts since this has happened in the last 3 days. First time that they've called on this many reservists that have been registered now to go ahead with the next plan. First time that they've targeted this many targets in Gaza in such a short space of time. The latest figure we had is 1,200. That was from probably about an hour to 2 hours ago. And obviously in the time that we've just been talking, there's been a few more. So that just gives you an idea of many firsts. And certainly at the time when this war, the October 6th war happened in 1973, that was a first that they could describe, Israelis describe it as the blackest day in their history. Well, this seems to be very different now. We're talking on a much, much larger scale. And of course, now Israel is fighting it off from two fronts now. We're talking about Gaza. It says it's targeting Hamas, clearly not just Hamas. Interestingly, a statement that has come out and is being quoted as a senior member in the military saying that they have information now on all of those that are being held captive Israelis, whether it's soldiers, whether it's civilians that were taken and dragged across the border into Gaza by those Hamas fighters. They said they've got all the information on them now, but they will continue to heavily bombard Gaza, even at the cost of taking of those captives dying in those airstrikes. And that's how they want to put that message across, that they are not backing down, even if that means losing some of their own citizens. Of course, if they have the intel, that's a different case, but let's see how that works out moving on. Now, we'll be hearing from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who keeps on using that same rhetoric that we are at war, that this, as he said, we will show the Middle East, the whole region, basically what they're capable of doing. And of course, with the backing of the US, one of its biggest financial and military support, its biggest friend as well, they are backing it up in every single way possible. So in terms of the situation here where I am in West Jerusalem, things are incredibly quiet. People are hunkering in their homes, both Israelis as well as Palestinians. They've closed their shops, so the whole of the old city is closed. So people are really waiting to see what's next, and I guess we'll find out more information, hopefully, when we hear from the Prime Minister himself very soon.
We will cross to him as soon as he comes up. We were talking earlier about the mechanisms of the government, Sarah. We know that there are a number of opposition figures in the Knesset who have been approached by the far-right coalition, by Netanyahu's coalition, to join their government, to join their coalition in this time of war. What have we been hearing? What's been their response to that call?
Interestingly, a couple of days ago, the opposition leader Yair Lapid had approached Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he would like to unite in a unity government because of the circumstances. And that, given the background, if you've been following Israeli politics since this new government came into power, you'll realize that there's been a real big divide, especially within Israeli society, because of how far-right, the most far-right government in Israeli history. So for them, for the opposition, they've said, we're going to put politics aside, let's pause on legislation, any changes to there's anything outside of what's happening now, and let's all get together and unite. And it seems that Benjamin Netanyahu is considering this. Now we're hearing from other opposition party leaders that are also saying that they too are considering an emergency unity government until this is all over. Of course, no one really knows at the moment how long that's going to take, but they are definitely sending a message to everyone that when it comes to what's happened to them a couple of days ago, there are no divisions here. They will stand together and make those decisions together.
OK, Sarah Harriott reporting there from West Jerusalem on what's coming from the government there in these extraordinary times as we're seeing these extraordinary strikes on the Gaza Strip, this small piece of land jam-packed with more than 2 million people surviving a barrage of airstrikes every few minutes. We're seeing the skies lighting up with the flames of the buildings that are on fire in the aftermath of those strikes. We saw some pictures earlier, the aftermath of the strikes in the Jabalia refugee camp. They were horrific, the people being brought out from under the rubble. One can only imagine what Gazans there are experiencing right now under this barrage of strikes that is not letting up. The most intense strikes they have ever felt there on the Gaza Strip. And these are people who are used to strikes by Israel. They've survived through 5 wars. They've rebuilt their city. This, though, the most intense strikes they've ever felt. That's the skyline of the Gaza Strip. That's the scene there. You can hear the drones, the planes overhead. You can hear the explosions. Meanwhile, moving north within Israel, up in the north part of the country, you've got the Palestinian armed group Islamic Jihad. This is another group taking responsibility for an incursion earlier in the day into northern Israel from Lebanon. Earlier on Monday, the Israeli military said its soldiers, backed by helicopters, killed fighters who were attempting that infiltration from Lebanon. Some residents on the Lebanon-Israel border have left their homes out of fear of an escalation now on that front. And this is the scene actually from that border, the active front, as our correspondent Zaina Hodder was calling it earlier. Huge fires through that region. This is the scene in southern Lebanon, northern Israel, where huge fires seem to be lighting up the night sky. Now, this is
Have a good day,
sparsely populated area. That's what we know about this area. On the Lebanese side, it is Hezbollah-led. They denied any responsibility earlier of the incursion that went from Israel into Lebanon, into Israel, which Israel responded to with artillery fire into Lebanon. Islamic Jihad, Palestinian group Islamic Jihad, since claimed responsibility for that incursion. This is an area that our correspondent Zaina Hodder said is one of the most volatile borders in the region. We are seeing huge fires burning there at the border. We are going to try and ascertain exactly what is happening there and why those fires are burning. And as soon as we can, we will be coming back to these pictures as and when we know. Let's bring in Marwan Bashawa, because he might be able to shed some light on what is happening, if not right now, but the general context around this region, because this, as I was saying, Marwan, is a hugely volatile region in itself.
Hey, Mitch, good to see you, bro.
Absolutely. You could expect anything at this point in time. I think everyone has lost their head, and clearly they are locked into a very dramatic and a tragic cycle of violence now. Retaliation and counter-retaliation would not stop. And clearly each party has a certain number of steps they want to take, and certain planning, or perhaps long-term planning that they've already started executing.
All right. Get rid of this. Yeah, I'll probably. Yeah, I'll probably be streaming more news later tonight. Oh. Yeah, we could probably pop up the StreamYard link and get some people up on panel and get some good conversation going. All right, y'all. Have a good Monday, and I'll probably see you guys tonight, so see ya.